So listen to this. In 2009, a reporter asked Peter Crouch what he would be if he wasn't a footballer. His answer was simple: a virgin. And as he would say later on, there are players who are destined for that kind of success. I wasn't that person. And he wasn't lying. If you asked an engineer to design the perfect footballer, it would look nothing like Crouch. The guy is 2 meters and 1 centimeter tall. This is what he looks like next to Santi Cazorla. This is what he looks like playing golf. Even Michael Jordan is shorter than him. But while Michael Jordan weighed about 95 kilos in his prime, Crouch weighed 70. As you might imagine, no club wanted to sign him, and even if they did, the fans would bully him away. I don't think people understand just how much abuse this guy took. It wasn't just the usual, how's the weather up there? He was humiliated. At one point, he was the punching bag of an entire country. It was so normalized that once I read an article where a journalist casually referred to him as a weirdo, sad-faced, parking lot carnival clown. Can you imagine? Most footballers start being lightly criticized and immediately start crumbling under the pressure, but Crouch somehow managed to push through all of that and still achieve more in his career than most footballers could ever dream of. He scored more goals than Bergkamp, provided more assists than Scholes, played in a Champions League final, won Player of the Year awards in 3 different clubs, broke the all-time record for the most headed goals in the Premier League, and still managed to pull off the 3rd highest goal-scoring rate in the history of the English national team, only below Kane and Lineker, despite the fact that he was never the first choice striker. In fact, no player even gets close to his minutes per goal ratio, but still, to this day, if you ask people about him, at the very best they'll tell you he was only a decent striker. Honestly, it seems like he's never gonna get the recognition he deserves. It's been like 30 years of this same narrative. Even as a kid, he was already suffering, wishing he could just be normal. As he said, I used to cry at night. I just wanted to be a normal height. Even his father seemed to play a role in making him so self-conscious. He was obsessed with the idea that his son had to become a footballer, and that seemed to make him resentful of his son's stature and even his personality, often berating him for being too nice. And his father seemed determined to change that one way or another. At one point when he was 14, his dad got so mad watching one of his training sessions that he simply left him there, forcing the kid to find his way back home all by himself. He was 15 miles away from home, for the love of God. And what's more shocking is that at that point, Crouch was already at Tottenham's academy. He wasn't some random kid. He was already seen as a promising talent, and somehow that wasn't enough. And as he grew taller and taller, things only got worse. Once he crossed the 2-meter barrier, Tottenham slowly stopped seeing him as a serious option, but only as a novelty with no real place in the top side. And then, well, they loaned him out to Dulwich Hamlet, playing in England's 8th division. And the surprising thing is that even there, he was disregarded, booed by the fans, just abused really. And with things getting seriously rough, they ended up looking for some other club to loan him to, and well, if he thought it couldn't get any worse, then he ended up at IFK Hasselholm in Sweden's 2nd tier, where they insisted he was no good if he couldn't put on some weight, demoting him to the reserves after only 1 appearance. And the result was simple. In his first match for the reserves, Crouch scored 5. Still, things were never really good there. Honestly, there was some serious worry that this could be it for Crouch, just another failed young talent. But luckily, someone at QPR heard about him, and seeing that Tottenham were willing to sell him off for peanuts, they asked him about it, and the deal was closed for a fee of only £60,000. However, the moment he stepped onto the pitch for the first time at QPR, it became clear that things wouldn't be any easier. He could literally hear the crowd laughing at him. It felt like he was the main attraction at the Loftus Road freak show. And his performances suffered. As his father said, he was a giant, but he was so scared that he hid on the pitch. You could see him shrink the moment he stepped inside. It seemed like, once again, Crouch was doomed from the start, but this time, something changed. In his own words, Crouch realized that when you look the way I look, if you want to survive, you gotta play better than everyone else. And so, he did, pulling off 12 goals by the end of the season, being named the club's Player of the Year, and becoming the one glimmer of hope as his team went down to the 3rd tier, even earning himself a move to Portsmouth for £1.5 million, which, if I may say, is a lot more than 60,000. Regardless, it was thanks to this move that Crouch met the man that would change his life forever, Harry Redknapp. Unlike the rest, Redknapp did truly give him a chance, and soon, as he said, he realized he had good control, was very skillful, and his touch was fantastic. Finally, someone had been able to see past his physical appearance, and Crouch flourished. By March, he was already on 19 goals, and since back in 2002 the transfer window system hadn't yet been put in place, Aston Villa put £5 million on the table and snatched him up midway through the season, making him their record signing at the time. And funnily enough, he would still be named Portsmouth's player of the season. Hey, when you're good, you're good. Regardless, now finally playing in the top tier, the pressure was worse than ever, and with Crouch earning the title of tallest player in Premier League history, well, the hazing got rough. Once he started his first full season with the club, he seemed to be struggling more and more over time, and by the end, not only had he been afforded only 582 minutes on the pitch, but he had gone a full season without scoring a goal. It was disastrous. At this point, it was a matter of deciding between sitting out his contract on the bench or going back to the Championship trying to reignite his career. But even though Crouch went with a second option, taking a 6-month loan move to Norwich, even there the results were lukewarm. Not awful, but nowhere near where he was 2 years before. And so, by the end of the season, he would be moving to Southampton for £2.5 million. His market value had been cut in half, and at 24 years of age, Southampton were already his 7th club, but at least he had secured the chance to play in the Premier League for one more year. Now, he just had to make sure not to waste it. But unfortunately, by mid-December, Crouch had made only 9 appearances for Southampton and had only scored 1 goal. Thankfully, it wasn't just Crouch. The entire club had been struggling. They were literally 2 points off the bottom of the table. And then, almost as a miracle, the manager was sacked and in came none other than Harry Redknapp. Upon arriving, Redknapp wasted no time. His first question was literally, why the hell isn't Crouchy playing? And what else can I say? Seeing the manager put his trust in him like that changed everything. On his first game in charge, Crouch scored. On his second, he scored again. A few weeks later, he went on a 4-match goal-scoring streak, all culminating with an historic goal that allowed Southampton to beat Liverpool, leading Benitez to repeatedly praise Crouch in the post-match interview. As he would later say, that's where I knew things had changed. I knew I was actually a Premier League player from that moment. I felt at the peak of my powers. It was the first time I truly felt 2 meters tall. 5 months later, Crouch had already scored 16 goals under Redknapp. He had played a mere 24 matches. If he could maintain that form for a full season, we would be looking at 30 goals a year. And I'm guessing Eriksson caught on to that as well, because right as the season ended, he handed Crouch his international debut. As he would say, I thought it couldn't get any better than that, but then my agent called and said, "Are you sitting down? Liverpool want to sign you." Look, this was incredible. Liverpool had literally just won the Champions League, while Crouch, no matter how much Benitez had praised him, had just gotten relegated. It was the easiest decision ever, but when he did end up signing for them, the fans were shocked, even the players were shocked, and maybe they were all right to be. As he began playing for Liverpool, the matches kept going by and he looked soft, undecisive, scared really. It was miss after miss, and 10 matches in, well, Crouch himself admitted that he was already thinking that maybe he should go back to Southampton, and the people felt entitled to mock him. One pundit claimed that Peter Crouch is a great striker if you don't want your striker to score goals. Another refused to even talk about him, saying he's boring, isn't he? And the newspapers, well, let's just say the expression Crouch potato became oddly common. But somehow, despite all of this, Eriksson still called him up to the national team. But honestly, maybe it was for the best if he hadn't. The people found it ridiculous. They didn't rate Crouch as a player and they didn't think he should be anywhere near the national team. So once he was subbed on, the entire stadium began booing him. It was the most humiliating moment of his career. As he said, after getting back to my flat, standing there alone after being booed by 56,000 people, well, the most depressed I've ever been was there. And somehow, it still got worse. 15 matches into the season, still without a goal and drawn 0-0 against Portsmouth, Liverpool got a penalty and Crouch, desperate to score, decided to wrestle the ball off of Gerrard's hands, deciding that he would take it himself. Gerrard was apprehensive, the coach was apprehensive, the fans were apprehensive, and then he missed. Thankfully, Zindan fixed it by scoring it on the rebound, but still, That is rock bottom for a striker. I don't even know what to say. It was just embarrassing. But finally, 5 months and almost 20 matches into the season, after 24 hours of game time, almost as a miracle, Crouch took a shot from 25 yards. It got deflected and ended up going in. As he ran towards the stands celebrating, he didn't realize the goal would be given as an own goal. But don't worry, not only did he score another in that same match, but after appealing, they even gave him the first one as well. And so, his goal drought ended. But what I find the funniest about the whole situation is that night, Crouch, who was frequently mocked by his friends for being the only footballer who didn't get any girls, ended up going out with them to celebrate and ended up being approached by a supermodel. A supermodel who became his wife. In his own words, after meeting her, I got this new confidence where I was like, I can play, and man, he really could. 3 games later, he pulled off a brace in the Club World Cup semi-finals, then he went 3 consecutive matches scoring, including a brace in the Merseyside derby. A month later, he scored against rivals Man United, had 5 more goals before the end of the season, as well as 6 assists, with one of them coming in the FA Cup final, and suddenly it was like he had made up for all of his wrongdoings. As he said, the worst time sort of became the best time of my life. Suddenly, it seemed like he had won over the Liverpool fans. All that was left was to win over the national team fans as well. So the ugly duckling of the golden generation did just that by simply becoming the first player to score 10 goals for England in a single calendar year since the 1920s, including a goal in the World Cup where he performed the iconic robot dance for the first time, endearing himself to the England fans like never before. However, the best was yet to come. In my opinion, 2006-2007 was not only Crouch's best ever season, but a massively underrated one. Not only did he score the winning goal in the Community Shield, but despite barely ever getting to play the full 90 that year, Crouch closed out the season with 27 goal contributions in 2,500 minutes of playing time. That's about 1 contribution every 90 minutes. Truly world-class numbers. And if you take into consideration where the goals were scored, it becomes even more impressive because Crouch was great in the Premier League. That perfect hat-trick against Arsenal was incredible, but in the Champions League, it was something else. He got to play a full match only 3 times over the entire tournament and still came out as the second highest goal scorer. Right in the playoffs, he made sure to score the winning goal, otherwise Liverpool would not even have been in the competition. Then he opened the tournament with a brace in a 3-2 win over Galatasaray, scoring a bicycle kick to win the game, then getting the only goal in the second match as well before closing out the group stage with a goal versus PSV. Unfortunately, then he broke his nose and ended up only being afforded 2 minutes against Barcelona, despite the fact that Puyol had named him as the player he feared the most in Liverpool's squad. Regardless, in the quarterfinals he came back with 2 goals, but in the semifinals he finally went blank. Though to be fair, the match was described as one with lots of drama but few highlights, so, it's not like anyone was scoring much. And well, in the final, for some reason he ended up strangely getting dropped for Dear Kites, so you can't really blame him for the loss. In fact, I gotta tell you a funny story about that. Only a few days before the final, Benitez decided the team needed some bonding time, so he took them go-karting, which was all fun until Crouch realized that his brakes had stopped working just as he entered the pits, where the entire team was standing. As he told it himself, I slammed the brakes, gone, no brakes. It was literally Alonso or Kite, so I thought to myself, who do we need the most? And I went straight towards Kite. I didn't know what to do, but he sort of spread his legs and I went through the middle. So yeah, he really tried his hardest to beat Kite to the starting 11. Actually, staying on the topic of struggling for a place in the starting 11, the next season, it would get much worse. Fernando Torres would arrive and I think we all know what that meant. Even with Crouch maintaining an incredible goal-scoring rate, there was only place for 1 striker in the team, so he left. But while everyone expected him to join another of Europe's top clubs, he ended up instead joining Redknapp once more, as the two dreamt of leading Portsmouth to European glory, with the club having somehow managed to qualify for the UEFA Cup. In fact, at 14 million euros, not only was Crouch a record signing back then, he still is to this very day, which is crazy. Regardless, despite the fact that Crouch once again scored a brace in the playoffs to save the club from missing out on the competition entirely, 2 months into the season, Redknapp shockingly left for Tottenham and the team was left to fend for itself, somehow still managing to secure a draw against AC Milan, only managing to secure their only win of the tournament thanks to another brace by Crouch in the last match versus Heerenveen. Regardless, after that was done, their big money spending over the last few years began catching up to them. Portsmouth were forced to sell Crouch, and to the surprise of no one at this point, he followed Redknapp once more, joining Tottenham. And well, the same trend continued. Even if his form dropped slightly, Crouch kept scoring, especially when it mattered the most, scoring in the second to last match day of the season against Man City to put Tottenham in the Champions League for the first time since 1962, only to then lose the first leg of the playoffs against Young Boys, forcing Crouch to once again save his team at the last minute with a hat-trick in the second leg, then scoring or assisting against every team he faced up till the quarterfinals, including the likes of Inter, AC Milan and Werder Bremen, only allowing Tottenham to be knocked out after being sent off 15 minutes into their match with Real Madrid, which was just painful to watch. The following season, being already 31 years old and with most being under the impression that he was past his prime, he was sold to Stoke City, where even with Tony Pulis forcing him to play alone up front in a system that was seemingly not interested in scoring goals, he still managed to shine brighter than everyone else around him, being named Stoke's Player of the Year, and eventually shocking everyone by playing 7 more seasons at Stoke, reaching 100 Premier League goals and making sure to bring the robot tents back to celebrate the landmark.